to Marvel Movie Talk right here on Geekscape. Very excited to talk to you all today, our great panel and everyone in the chat or watching the archive about X-Men 97 episodes 3 and 4, Fire Made Flesh, and Motendo / Lifedeath Part 1. As always, I am Christian Bladt, our returning champion. Welcome back, Nate Miller. Great to see you here. Thank you.
Happy to be here.
And of course, the El Sassy Pants, Katie Hampton. Thank you so much. And Kane Marco, the Juggernaut, taking up full screen. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. That's actually Count Eric Conner. And of course, David Brody, Brooklyn boy extraordinaire, fan of the still winless New York Mets, much like myself and Eric Conner. But fortunately, we are not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about X-Men 97 episodes 3 and 4. And Nate, because you weren't with us last week talking about the first two, just kind of give us a quick overview, your connection to the original animated series and your expectations going into this one.
Sure. So I watched it as a kid, as I'm sure a lot of people did. It was really my introduction to comics, kind of. Like X-Men has always been my primary comic interest. And the old show was just fantastic at telling these very comic booky stories, but still delivering them in a way that like kids have things they can enjoy and people who are more mature that watch it can enjoy. And so far I have just been absolutely like loving this. I've been telling everyone I know to watch it. The thing that really hit me was that fight scene in the second episode with Cyclops and with Morph, and like I never thought to myself, I never realized, because in my head when Cyclops was fighting the bad guys, like they were doing stuff, but if you go back, he's just like going and then the guys go but so getting to see him like shoot a concussive blast to knock a dude's leg out from under him and then uppercutting him, I was like, oh my god, that's like everything I wanted to see. And Morph switching into Psylocke, and like it was just awesome.
Yeah, he turned into Archangel at one point.
Yes.
Yeah, I love using Morph for cameos. It's kind of it's a neat trick that they figured out how to do.
Also, like power level wise, just showing how strong like Morph can be. I'm also, my favorite thing about it, outside of the action being really good, is that it's not a reboot; it is a continuation, and they're just jumping right into all the super comic booky weird story stuff, and not like shying away from that, which I was kind of nervous that they would do. But
right, no, I think that it has all the charm of the original, which was the fact that it felt like the comic books. Obviously things are different, and we're going to talk about some of those differences as we look at these episodes. But it really, I mean, it's X-Men 97 because the 92 series ended in 97, and then they're smart, like, well, it's been 6 months, so a lot's happened, like look how pregnant Jean is, for example, so I thought that they did a good job sort of just continuing with it. But it wasn't like, oh, and then right after the final episode faded out, we faded up on the new one. I think it's good to give us a little breathing room. And I like that they've highlighted some different characters. We're really getting to spend a lot of time with Magneto, and Bishop, I think, is, somebody who, from the era that these stories pull from, that this lineup of the team, I think it's been great so far. Now, Katie, you also weren't with us last week. It was a boys' club last week, and we apologize for excluding you. No, we didn't.
Sausage party. Come on.
Yeah, I know you missed out. No, to be fair, we did invite you. You had
yeah.
Your text, your exact words of your text were, "I have better things to do."
That's weird. I don't remember saying that.
That sounds like her.
Katie, real quick, your thoughts when you heard that this series was going to happen and how you felt about it, and then we'll dive into these two episodes.
I don't think I heard about this until right before it released, and I was like, oh, they're doing that? I was like, wait, and it's the original song? I was like, and they're doing a similar opening? I was like, whoa, what? Like, it took me by surprise, and it was one of those shows that I would occasionally watch as a kid, but I Christian family, you know, like I got pulled away from stuff like that a lot of the time, or I was off.
Yeah, no, honey. VeggieTales is on. Okay,
Trust
all right.
me, I know all about that tomato and cucumber.
Okay, but what about the show?
Well, that was a different story there.
Oh, don't get the bell.
I know,
He's
Nate
ready
hates
over
the
it.
But
the
Eric
bell
was
was
so
there.
mad last week when I didn't have the bell, so I had to. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
goodness.
I come
Try
for
to
the
keep
bell.
it to a minute. Yeah.
But this was where I was introduced to like Rogue and like some of these other characters. I honestly, there's so many pieces of this show that I did not remember. Like I completely forgot about Jubilee. And I was like, because she just didn't interest me when I was younger as like a superhero. But like Rogue was my homie. I loved Storm. Everyone was really cool. And I'm loving the animation style on this show. It like I love, like Nate said, that it just picks up from where it left off. I'm loving this the episode that we're going to be talking about today. I'm very excited about because this is right up my alley. The 8-bit animation stuff, it's blowing me away.
Well, let's go around and talk first about episode 3, Fire Made Flesh, which we left episode 2 on the cliffhanger of there's another Jean, and there were some questions at the end of that episode, one of which I attempted to answer by saying, well, we don't know for sure that our Jean was actually the real Jean. Sorry, I need to deserve a bell for that one. It's always very confusing. I think as with the first couple episodes, the problem here is that they condensed about 6 years worth of storytelling into half an hour. The Goblin Queen, the Madeline Pryor, the all of it. And I'm like, man, you knew you had a season 2 pickup. Like, let it breathe for a little bit. I mean, have this Jean show up and like, yeah, I just had this address on a piece of paper. I don't even know who any of you are. Really, take some time with it. I want to start with Mr. Brody because he did text me to say that I believe you did not enjoy the life and crimes of Madeline Pryor as portrayed in Fire Made Flesh, correct, sir?
I did not. I think some of us might be familiar with Chris Claremont and why he wrote the Madeline Pryor storyline, because Phoenix was dead and she was just supposed to be his happy ending and give him something to have, right? And then 90 episodes later, she became Goblin Queen. But on this show, it was like 3 minutes. She went from a loving mother to an evil demon who hated everybody. Like that. It was just, you couldn't do 2 episodes. Like I complained last week about the Magneto trial being wrapped up like in 14 minutes. And they just topped it. They just went out of their way. I mean, I know you wanted to save room for the arcade episode we're going to talk about.
Well, it's not arcade. That's a different character. It's the Mojo.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. The game that took place in arcade, not actually arcade.
The original series had an arcade episode. I'd love for him to come back.
I think his first appearance was X-Men 110 or 109, something like that. Anyway.
So he's trying to show off. Okay.
I am trying to show off. I'm trying to show that I have a lot of old comics in my house. Anyway. The Goblin Queen. So the Goblin Queen, yeah, it just happened too quickly. There was no motivation for it. It was like Scarlet Witch in Multiverse of Madness times 100, where you just took this innocent woman and now she's the devil. She changes her clothing. And by the way, Jean Grey couldn't create clothing. Phoenix could, which tells me that maybe she has a little bit of the Phoenix Force in her to have created that outfit. Because unless Mr. Sinister did, because Jean can't do that. So I just found that.
So Jean's never sat behind a sewing machine, is what you're trying to tell me.
Well, she might have sewn the green original Marvel Girl costume because that didn't look like it took a lot of effort.
Yeah,
but the Goblin Queen.
Just to interject for a moment, if I had the Price is Right sound effect, the bum 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 bum. Uncanny X-Men 111. Oh. Thank you for playing, Mr. Brody. You do get a copy of our home game.
I thought 110 was the pinball machine cover. I could be wrong.
110's a fill.
Okay. All right, my bad. Anyway.
You fool!
Well, wait a minute.
Anyway, I was not going to let that slide.
I was under by 1. I was under by 1. 110. Oh, 110 is Banshee's on the cover, if I remember correctly, with Juggernaut.
All right. Well, let's talk about the Goblin Queen.
Yeah. Anyway, the Goblin Queen, they obviously put more clothing on her for Disney because.
Well, look, they had to.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like the costume for that version of the Goblin Queen might as well have wandered right off the show floor at Jumbo's Clown Room. And I know that that's a Los Angeles reference, but it's a funny enough name that I think most people will get it. But yes, there is definitely some differences. I agree with you, Mr. Brody.
Yep. Can you see that, by the way?
I don't know what you have there.
Oh, it's a little blurry.
Too much glare. That's
much glare.
crazy what you're doing. All right.
Oh, that's X-Men 110 where they're fighting Arcade. So
okay. All right. Back to so yes, they definitely changed the outfit. What did you think about that episode, Eric? Episode 3.
I think the concern I have comes externally, if not internally. And what I mean is what you just brought up, Brett, is such a good point. Like, they are burning through plot, and I mean, the good news is X-Men's been around a while. They've got a lot of places still to explore. But I agree. Like, I really did actually enjoy the episode as an episode, as like, oh my gosh, there's cool stuff happening here. It did one of those montages of everyone sort of coming face to face with their fears, but was so well designed that I thought it really played. But the concern I have, thank you. Thank you. Yes, this is my winter line.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
that is the Goblin. That is the Goblin Queen right there. Yeah, exactly. So,
boy, that's a lot of air down south.
A lot of air all around.
Yeah. I mean, like,
I would say there's so much air. There's almost areola. That's how much air there is.
Oh,
get that bell out. Ring the bell.
2 times.
No bell worthy of that.
He put the air in areola. It's brilliant.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
That actually seems like a push-up bra situation. Like, that actually seems like that might be comfortable with like a little under boob show.
That's double-sided tape. I mean, I think we all know how it works. Yeah. All right. So, Eric, I agree. There's 80 years worth of storylines to pull from, but by my estimation, only 20 of those years are worth telling the stories.
Sure.
So, yeah, no, I do agree, and I know I might be in the minority on that, but they are really just kind of, and look, they have a 10-episode season, but I personally would have liked all of that to breathe more.
There's so much great tension there that they had for like a scene, and they could have played that out over multiple scenes. I mean, I think some of the best moments here are like Scott trying to figure out, like, who is she? Wait, you brought it back up?
Yeah, I think it's important because Nate, I'm just sort of wondering, your thoughts though about how the story unfolded, and maybe just some of us who spent years watching the story unfolded, we have the wrong perspective, and maybe you and Katie feel like no, that was one episode.
Years looking at that out.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are old, that's for sure.
Yes, the guys are old, but
almost
Nate
as
and Katie are not.
old as this storyline. So I definitely agree.
Wait, sorry, Nate, I have to interject. What year were you born?
Yes.
No, because the storylines, the Goblin Queen part is from 1989. That's why I asked.
Yeah, no,
So
this is
feel
before
like
my
it's
time.
Yes,
I was born in 92.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
came into a post-Goblin Queen world and went back and was like, oh my God, what a fever dream this was. I'm so glad we're beyond this. I do agree that it definitely is a very long and complex story that they condensed really quickly, but they also kind of changed the order a little bit with Scott not leaving yet. So I think the fact that it takes place before he leaves kind of gives me less of a pause for it to kind of develop as quickly as it does. The way that I interpreted it was that the Jean that we have seen in the, probably like season 5 and season 4 of the show originally has been Madeline Pryor the whole time, and so for me, that was the interesting part of, okay, was this like an ongoing plot thread that we just never saw resolved because of how the show ended? I think they are just kind of tacking it on post haste, but I do think it does make sense, especially for I don't think that story is over. I think that was more of a setup kind of a thing of now we know Goblin Queen's out there, and now our real Jean is back, and now we have to find out how long she's been gone, and now we have to reckon with Scott having a kid with another woman while Jean's back and not realizing that it wasn't his wife and all of that stuff, right? And then there's the whole Sinister with Cables in the future. Like, so this for me felt a lot more like this is setting up more things later down the line for these characters to have these kind of arcs. So from that element, I really liked incorporating these older storylines and arcs in a way that is, somewhat truthful to the original source material, but also fits more in the, not just the context and the like the way that they're presenting the story now, but also in a way that is visually entertaining. And I do have to remind myself that this is a kid show. Even now, with it being rebooted and them knowing that a lot of adults that watch it at kids are going to watch it again, they want you to watch it with your kids. They want to sell toys, right? So these episodes, especially nowadays, have to have stuff that moves quickly and stuff that happens, because if they did it at the pace that they did at the old show, even we would be like, this is so slow. Like, what's happening? So
I will say rewatch, because we started rewatching the original last night just to like be like, I can't remember what happened. And that it brought out a lot in the pilot just alone. But like they go hard pretty quick. And I know that like there's certain storylines and things and arcs that it feels like they're not necessarily retconning, but like sort of like wrapping up in a way of like different questions that we had that were left on the table after that the original show ended. But I am seeing, I agree with you, Nate. Like I do see like tendrils of things. I mean, like Scott's kid got sent to the future. So it's like at some point we're going to see that kid fully grown, I'm sure, but also kind of get rid of the whole.
Wait, hang on a second. Before you say anything, Nate, do you know who their kid is in X-Men lore? Because if you don't, I don't want to actually say it. Do you know who Scott and Madeline Pryor's kid grows up to be? And it was not. No, it's fine if you don't. It's actually better if you don't. That's why I just want to put the brakes on that for a second. Maybe we might have to end up talking about it. But if he appears in, let's put it this way, if he doesn't show up by the end of the season, we'll talk about it. But I'd love for that reveal to show up.
But yeah, I mean, they kind of did it already in the previous show, but I know not everybody picked up on that.
That's right. And you haven't watched all the previous show just yet. So Katie.
Yeah. Well, but here's the thing is that they are paying attention to all these little details. Like if you see in the opening credits, Jean Grey in the very beginning, she's got the ponytail going. Yeah. And then now she's got the hair down. As like our Jean Grey, quote unquote.
Yeah. And we did talk about that when we talked about the first two episodes. And we've seen that through all four of these. The opening has changed a little bit each week, and
it's cool.
I think that's pretty cool, actually. Yeah, to see some of the stuff that we've
feels specifically like for the adults who are Easter egg hunting and being like, the kids won't necessarily pick up on that. But speaking of kids, Nate, to your point, our guest last week, Jordan Bloom, who, by the way, he and Patton Oswalt, their new series from Dark Horse, did show up at your comic book shop yesterday. If you want to check out Volume 2 of Minor Threats, that's now available, and we appreciate him spending time with us. But he talked about how he had watched it that morning with his kids while they had breakfast cereal. It was like old times. And I think that that's a big appeal of this show is, yes, adults watching it, but it's, if you have kids that are the right age, you're like, no, I want to watch this with them. And you don't want it to go too far,
But one thing I was actually just going to jump on that for one sec, because one thing I think I've been actually impressed by is like, maybe the outfits aren't quite as risque as the Goblin Queen. Feel free to bring it back up if you need to.
Research.
I have more comments on her too. Yeah,
you're asking for it.
You have more comments on her than his clothing on her.
I think Cameron Egan was saying she wears this in Chicago.
Cam Egan said, I wear that to work every day. And Craig Robinson said, are you not in Chicago? Seems a bit breezy for that. Yeah.
Well, that's what happened to it. The wind blew half of it right off, or 2/3 of it, let's say.
Yes. Madeline Pryor is perpetually on that grate that Marilyn Monroe was on, where her dress blew up. She's just always standing there, and she travels.
The Chicago style version of it, though. Is more
but I'd like you to finish your thought, Eric.
More hot dogs.
I'll try to focus here. So I actually found though that like considering, family friendly, considering the word Disney being used sometimes in not the most positive ways for what happens to the content for shows like this, I
Hmm.
found like a lot of what they actually did show, though not quite not R rated. I mean, they had a baby in peril more than
Yeah.
once. And so I don't feel too much like they've pulled punches on this thing. I mean, X-Men the cartoon was always family friendly. It was not a show like Invincible,
Yeah.
where in case you
Oh.
wonder what it looks like when you pulverize someone's head into meat,
Oh.
you watch that pilot, you'll find out very quick.
Very,
But
very quickly,
Sure.
yes.
but I found like the darkness of these moments, like they let it play. There's a moment of Magneto with Rogue that is, they're both basically naked and embracing, and I'm like, okay, I mean, that is very much what you would see in a comic book.
No, and a
And
lot of
Disney
stuff
won't
like
make
that are very iconic images
Yeah.
from mostly covers, but a lot of it stands out, from just things that a lot of us will remember for sure, So
Well, and I think there is a massive dearth of like content that is geared towards not just kids, but like teen kids and their parents, especially when it comes to animation. Like, you may have your Rick and Mortys and things like that, but even that is more geared towards college kids. And I think that's one of the things that I feel like is an interesting path for Disney to go towards, but is a smart path because it's going to open up a lot of different genres of content for kids in a like middle range who are just starting to get into action figures or things like that, or video games or whatever.
Yeah, and I do agree with the idea that there will be more Sinister, there'll be more of Madeline Pryor, and maybe not even in this season. We're doing a little bit of a slow build for some of these things. When we talk about our second episode, we'll talk a little bit how that's going to continue a little bit later in the season, that sort of thing. But in general, it kind of continued the way that the show had been progressing through the first two episodes, where yes, I felt like it moved a little fast in terms of just the amount of story being told. But to Nate's point, for people not born in the 70s, maybe some things that we're used to just happen too slow. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the world we're used to.
Well, and there were longer episodes, or there were more episodes in the original series, right? There weren't 10 episodes like there are now, which is a style thing that I'm like, come on, give us a 30 episode.
Wow, it's creative bookkeeping. You order 2 10-episode seasons instead of 1 20-episode season. They know what they're doing. Let's put it that way. That is the model that we do have now. But in general, I wanted to circle back to Mr. Brody, and if your view of the series continues, we might have to break out a new game, which is what did David Brody enjoy in the episode? But instead, I'm just going to ask you outright: was there anything? We're only talking about the first episode.
Yeah.
Were there any characters or interactions that you're like, okay, this part worked, but in general, or did you just feel that the
no?
whole
I thought episode 3 worked. I very much like Forge and his relationship with Storm.
Well, no, that's episode 4.
Yeah. Oh, I thought they touched on it briefly. Didn't he approach her initially in 3?
You're right. At the very end of 3, you're absolutely
yeah.
right.
So,
Yes.
So just touching on, I'm saying I like them. I know where it's going.
Yeah.
I read, I have the original comics that I read, so hopefully they pull it off like they did in the comics. I thought, again, I just felt it was rushed. So I feel like the Dark Phoenix saga would have been like an episode and a half if it was now. And so I didn't get to really, I wanted to see Scott suffer with the choice between the two women, right? It kind of went quickly. And the kid's gone, right? Bishop's off the show now. He's out of the credits.
Yeah, he's out of the credits for sure. Yeah. I think Bishop will get a standalone. If I had to guess, Bishop will get a standalone.
Oh yeah, I think
there's all the support. There's his sister Shard. There's all these supporting characters that I do believe we will see.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and
so I did like that Beast tested their DNA to see who was the right one, and I thought the episode was, up until the Goblin Queen part, I thought the episode was handled well. I needed a little more length.
I agree that I was surprised that it got to that point so quickly. Well, because I know Nate's time is a little bit limited, I do want to make sure that we get to talk to you specifically, Nate, about both parts of episode 4. So let's jump right in with Jubilee's 18th birthday, and I'm like, that girl is much older than I thought she was. I thought she, she's not 13 and a half like Kitty Pryde when she joined, but I thought Jubilee was a similar age, so good for her. But what did you think of the Mojo storyline? Who, for our visual audience, you can of course see our friend Mojo right behind me.
So this one definitely for me was like this is a kid show, kind of a moment. But what I really did enjoy was like just all of the like nostalgia bomb references of like the arcade X-Men and like the 8-bit art and the 16-bit art, and like it was like I was so absorbed in that I didn't really care as much that it was just like a generic "you got to grow up someday, kid" kind of a story.
Sure.
But I did think that the way that they incorporated the pass off with the like we talked about the older Jubilee actor and the new Jubilee actor, and kind of having that moment with the two of them, I thought that was really cool. And also, again, another really awesome demonstration of the animation style that they've done. Like, that was the coolest Jubilee I have ever seen. Like the disc blades, and that was awesome. Also, a good use of Mojo too, I think, like, who is still obviously very much a kind of meta jokey character, but was kind of scary in some spots in that fight that they had.
Yeah, no,
good.
I think that him moving on to the world of video games from television programming, even in 1997, made sense. And yes, there's a lot of this character type that someone's basically a puppet master controlling everything. Mojo is one of the most fun of those because of just the maniacal, sadistic, just what a crazy character he is, and he does tend to be fun. What did you think of this first story, Katie?
I thought it was definitely interesting. I agree. It was a little bit, typical of the like getting older type storyline, which fine, totally fine. But I like the Nintendo 8-bit and animation stuff was unreal. I was so excited. Even having Mojo back, I was like, whoa, what happened? I love that they made like, did you get a facelift? Like when you lost a little bit of weight or something like that? Like that was hilarious.
And I love that the reason was stress.
Yeah.
He's just too stressed out.
I was thinking Ozempic, but they didn't want to mention it.
It was a perfect time for a tie-in, yeah.
But and like we got a couple of little cameos of other villains and stuff in there, which I thought was really cool. And like the story made sense. It was an interesting way to incorporate a character that I feel like still needs to show us his actual powers. And what's the name of the new kid? Sunspot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for that kid to pop off, like, because I'm like, what is your point? And then I honestly thought when they did like almost, I guess, an act break or whatever, when he game overed, I was like, cool. Like, I wouldn't mind it. Like, it would be a cool like Mojo thing, or not a morph thing. Like, maybe we kill him now and then he comes back later. I don't know. But then he comes back and I was like, and you're still not going to use your powers? Okay, cool.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that, I mean, Sunspot's actually got a really cool power set. You want to talk about a storyline that is taking too long. It's making us
you're slow rolling that.
Yeah.
Well, I think they're setting him up for spinoff, for a New Mutant spinoff, if I had to put money on it.
Yeah. And for our visual audience, you're seeing one of my favorite things that Mojo was responsible for, which was the characters of the X-Babies, which was basically a group of kids that looked just like that era of the X-Men. I want to, we can circle back to Motendo, but I want to quickly talk to both Eric and Mr. Brody about it. I feel like, Brody, your sense of it will be fairly quick. But Eric, what did you think of this first story of episode 4, Motendo?
Well, I'm trying not to sing X-Men Babies to the tune of Muppet Babies. I'm resisting that urge.
That's in all of our heads the rest of the day now. Thank you.
Thank you. I my job here is done. This episode is, it's a lark. It's like one of those, like, it's not even a full episode, right?
It's a half filler because they have 10 episodes, so they can only do half an episode as filler.
Yeah, right. I think. Sorry
That's
about that.
blunt.
I think they realized that there wasn't much meat on that bone, but it was fun. They definitely, the animators had such a blast with this. I don't know if you guys ever saw the Community episode where they entered an 8-bit video game,
Yes.
which was one of the greatest moments of pop culture that whole year. And so going into their own game was great. Christian, I even sent you some pics. I have not the 4-player version, but I have the iCade or whatever it's called version of the fighting X-Men game. So I took like a quick shot of that, and so they had fun with it. I'm glad they kept it short. Smart to make it a half. I also liked that last moment of them kissing. I thought was pretty special, And yes, of course, Jubilee's lights go off.
Well, come on.
Then
What do you
going
want,
from
man?
that to then Storm's episode, it was like this kind of frothy, almost like a romantic comedy into something really dark and bleak, about romance that I thought really played.
I want to get Nate's thoughts on the dark and bleak, but Mr. Brody, as we cycled through some of these images from the show, that's actually not that episode, but what were your thoughts of Motendo? I believe that the summation of your text to me was 2 letters, oi.
Yeah, I did send you, and I also sent you a screenshot from the cartoon Gem.
Gem and the Holograms, yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Which that's what the episode reminded me of. I thought the Motendo and the artwork, I thought that was great. I love the 16-bit. We all played those games, the scrolling X-Men game, walking down the street. The plot was very young. We had just talked about short attention span with the part of the audience that might be watching it, which is why they crammed the Goblin Queen in so quickly, right? But then you took a cliffhanger with the Goblin Queen and all that drama with Jean, and you ignored it for an episode. Yeah. Right. So now you're asking people with no attention span to wait 2 weeks to hopefully continue. I thought that was an odd choice. This episode, the non-Storm part, the video game part, again, the animation was great. The flashbacks, the scenes they put them in, enjoyable. The script writing for me, very young, almost goofy young. And I thought it was a departure from the first 2 episodes, the first 3 episodes that had a more mature tone to them. This was like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, if you guys saw that. So,
I mean,
right. So,
saw it, every week I was watching Spider-Man.
Every week, right. So, I found that to be a little bit young. And then the Sunspot thing. At first, he says, I don't want to use my powers in public. I don't want to be seen. But then he finds out he's in a video game and still doesn't use his powers. There's no one there to see him using his powers. So, you're willing to die rather than use your powers seems odd to me.
His power is he's an a-hole. That's what.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I do brown spot.
But to be fair, I think that's literally his
Katie's
point,
the best.
David.
Yeah.
Is that he would rather die than use his powers.
Which is hilarious. And I just don't understand his motivation. Since the moment he showed up, I'm like, okay, so why are you part of this group? Even though you're ousted by your parents, you don't want to be seen by public, you don't want to be a mutant. That's fine. Why are you with everyone? And Jubilee is like, oh, I'm falling in love with Jubilee. Okay, but still.
And also, when Sunspot uses his powers, you can't see who he is. He's completely blacked out, right. So it's not like he's walking down the street and he's shooting rays out of his fingers.
Got a name tag.
He turns completely black and electric and whatever. So
haven't seen him totally turn that. So I would argue that that's something that comes later as he actually learns to use his powers. Now, he's just blasting beams because he never uses it. He's got no practice. He doesn't do.
All right. Bet pool. What episode does Sunspot actually show up and use his
Solar
powers?
Eclipse episode.
Probably the finale.
I agree with Nate. I think it's the finale.
So the one thing I want to say though, I do think that his motivation is not as well fleshed out as it should be, and I think for a lot of people that know the comic, it's not as much of a problem because that is part of his character.
Okay.
But not having that context, I do think it is a little lacking. However, as much as I would agree that the dialogue in this episode is very childish, I think the thesis behind the writing of tying all these different characters together is really smart. I think you have DaCosta, who is having that teenage puberty, like my body's changing, I don't know who I am, I'm scared of like being this different person because I want people to accept me. You have Jubilee, who originally started there, right, and now she's turning 18, and she's, as the other younger character, bringing the other young character along with her on her journey of self-discovery, and like this is, you know, again, the puberty thing, right? And on the flip side of that, as we're about to talk about, is you have Jubilee coming into her own, right? And at the other hand, you have Storm, who has someone who has already come into her own and now lost that, and now she has to kind of rediscover, you know, in like a midlife crisis thing of like, well, what am I really? Like, what, you know, what do I value? What do I value about myself? You know, all of these kind of deep questions. So I thought the parallels of putting these two little minisodes together, I thought was actually really smart from a larger storytelling perspective.
Right. And I want to give you the chance to kind of run with that, Nate, because I know you've only got a few more minutes. So what did you think of the telling of the Life-Death story? And I think a good starting point is, are you familiar with the source material, which is the first part of Life-Death was Uncanny 186. It is the issue after Storm is shot in the back and loses her powers, and Storm, you know, basically goes through this very similar journey with Forge that we saw in this episode.
I mean, so I am familiar with the original comic. That is one of the few of that era that I do more vividly remember, and it's specifically because of the visual storytelling in that book, which was very different than a lot of the other stuff that was coming out, you know, before that.
It's beautiful artwork from an artist named Barry Windsor Smith, who really did miniseries and one-offs, and is apparently a tremendous asshole and difficult to work with. Everyone says,
a comic book
but
artist?
he's an exceptionally talented comic book artist. So yeah, so he did both Life, Death, and its sequel, which we'll talk about later in the season. So what do you think about the way that this essentially half story unfolded here?
So this is the one where I will definitely concede that the pacing kind of suffers here. Because at least for me, with my attachment to that story, it's something that I want to kind of have a little bit more time and like reflective thought to. That being said, there's still more to come, and it does seem like they're going to totally lean into all the weirdness, which is really cool. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence. I definitely think, like I said, I definitely think pairing these two episodes together was good because you had the lightheartedness and then kind of the darkness, and like this part was like not as fun. And I know like it wasn't supposed to be fun because it's like a tough, troubling time that she's going through, but like I don't know. It was kind of a downer. I do like seeing more Forge, and then also too oh my god, all of the Easter eggs in Forge's workshop were awesome. Like the photo of X Factor.
That's the one I was going to mention, Nate. I love that there was the
also Bastion too. There's a photo of Forge with Bastion and what's his name? Not Stryker, the other one. Anyways, yeah, there's so many cool Easter eggs in there. What?
No, I'm not sure who it was, but I know
it's Captain something. He's the Sentinel guy who has the pink V on him. You just see his shoulder in that picture.
No, that's Bastion.
Okay.
But
that's what I thought you were talking about. It's the doctor from Muir Island.
Yes.
That's it. That Mystique pretended to be him in the original show.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's lots of cool Easter eggs and stuff that were set up in that, and I think Forge is a really cool character.
Agreed.
I did really like the Power Collar reveal tie-in was good, especially since like that was only 4 episodes ago. So I know that I on the one hand I like things spread out, but also I like things to be like contained enough, and I feel like 4 episodes was good enough to be like you're directly responsible for this problem you're trying to fix, and that is a really cool character arc. So I don't know, I'm excited to see where they go with it. I am conflicted because on the one hand, like, yeah, I want the next episode to be the next part and to finish it, but also I do think there is an advantageous reason to like have this pause, like they put this here and then go back to the Scott Jean Grey stuff, right? And then we'll get a Bishop episode, and then they'll come back to this, and like I feel like in that way of spacing them out, they can kind of let them breathe a little bit more, especially too when we're watching them like this. One of my favorite things about this is it reminds me of the old school days of watching cartoons, where you watch the cartoons. You watch the one episode, then you go to school and you talk to all your friends like, oh my God, that was crazy. What's going to happen? Like, what do you think? Right. And a lot of that stuff we lose when we get in the binge watching space, because people watch at different times in different spaces and they watch different episodes. So I like having this kind of like, well, now up until the next episode comes out, I can talk to my other friends, especially the ones that don't know the comics. And I can be like, oh, what do you think is going to happen? Like, what about this? What about that? And to me, that's a really fun part of it.
No, you're touching on probably the worst part of binge culture, which is it's like, oh, do you watch that show? Hey, did you see the? No, I'm 3 seasons behind. And I'm like, all right, so I literally can't talk to you about it. In about I think it's 2 weeks from now, we'll have Life Death Part 2. And the thing that I hope is that she does not get her powers back quickly, because it was years in the comics. And I think exploring Storm without her powers is something that when I saw the titles of the episodes before they even premiered, I was like, wow, they're going to go there. And I think if you're going to do it, at least spend a little time with it. What do you think, Nate, before we let you go? Do you hope that we get the depowered Storm for a little while?
It's tough because I, especially with that first scene with her glassing the desert, and like, I want to see her do more crazy stuff because it was so cool. But I do agree. Like, I think even for the character would benefit more from spending a little bit more of that time without it, and then when it comes back, it'll mean so much more than if in the same season she loses her power, she gets her powers back.
And it's only like 3 episodes later or whatever.
Right.
I agree. Well, Nate, we're gonna let you go. Please let everybody know where they can keep in touch with you on social media.
Dog like Nate with 2 G's, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook Reels, all of that stuff. Argue with me, please, about X-Men stuff. I'll be all day long.
When we talk next Thursday, we'll only have 1 episode to talk about, so the show will be able to breathe a little bit more. We were just playing a little catch up. Anyway, Nate, thanks so much. Look forward to talking to you as the season goes along.
Good to see you guys.
And yes, dog like Nate, as he said. Yes, so we appreciate that as always. So let's go to you next, Katie. So your thoughts on this story, which it seems like. I was thinking that I'm wondering how much your husband, Mark, knows these stories, where if you were like, yeah, they didn't want to tell me who was Gina Madeline Pryor's kid, if he'll just blurt out who it is, because he's like, oh, well, I thought everybody knew that.
He might.
Is he watching this in a different way than you?
No, I mean, because we're kind of both just foggy on the story of the originals, and so it's taken us a minute. So we are going back to the original, which I love that Disney Plus put that on there, because of course we're all going to want to like look at our reference material. But this episode, I was very confused. Like when the Motendo thing started to wind down, I was like, wow, we're wrapping this up. Like we had paused it at one point. And I was like, there's still like 30 minutes left. What's going on here? And then I was like, oh, we're doing 2 episodes in 1. Interesting. And then we bring it to Storm, which I've been like very curious about. I'm glad we're going to Storm. But man, first of all, I'm going to be using some like video game terms, but they totally buffed Storm's character just in look and like the mohawk. Like, I was so excited for Storm coming back in this series. And then immediately they like take away our powers. And I was like, no, what are you doing to one of the best characters ever? And they completely nerfed her. And I'm interested in the storyline. I did not read this comic. I'm very curious about this new character. Forge, which I'm loving sort of the elements that he can basically fix things as long as he figures out what it is that's actually broken.
Well, I love her line to him is like, do you have a mutant power or are you just a genius? And it's like, yeah, it's a great question. I actually hadn't thought of it that way, but sorry, finish your point, Katie.
No, I mean, and like, that's one of the things that like, I feel like, we start to get into, hopefully not the midichlorians of this whole series and what things work and what things don't.
Whoa. No midichlorians talk on this show. What have I told you?
I'm saying, I hope that's not where we're going, but I do love the idea that a mutant power can be like something that's super advanced science that like they can like, I don't know, morph or change like certain elements of a person or like help them in different ways, which is like such a powerful like ability and yet such a scary ability at the same time. So I'm really enjoying this. But my God, the depression in this episode. I was like, if we are gonna stay with Storm powerless, I would love for her to discover some different part of humanity, something that connects her with the non-mutant, something that shows her that she is way more of an interesting character than just.
Do you think it would help if we had depowered Storm walk the earth like Kane from Kung Fu, or possibly David Banner in the old Incredible Hulk series?
Absolutely.
So to this point, in the chat, Ivan Soto says this didn't bother people that they took away a powerful character's powers. This always bothers people. On in NBC's Heroes, for example, they took away the powers of the most powerful character. He was the bad guy. I think that was the point. As Daniel Drew points out, this is a very established story arc. It is a very important part of Aurora Monroe, the crowning achievement of which is after she loses her powers, she fights Cyclops. She battles Cyclops to see who leads the X-Men.
Spoilers here, possibly.
And she wins without powers, which just begins basically an entire generation of humiliating Cyclops, but that's what he gets for walking out on his wife.
The ultimate cuckold.
And honestly, this is a situation that they had in The Witcher in season 2 when Yennefer loses her powers, and like people were like, that's not really what happened in the books and whatever. And I was like, but I liked seeing how she handled stressful situations without the use of her power. And I don't feel like we're there yet in, I guess, what maybe the storyline will be of like how she is powerful within her own self without her actual powers before she gets them back, yada yada. But it's hard to see her so powerless.
In the comics, it was about 4 years of our time before she got her powers back. But it's like a few months in continuity. But by the time she got her powers back, I think everybody was like, "Oh yeah, good, okay, yeah, we kind of had enough of that." It's a very interesting thing to explore for the reasons that Ivan's talking about. You have this beloved member of the X-Men, this incredibly powerful character, and similar to in the comic books, the shot that Storm takes was actually intended for Rogue. In this, it was intended for Magneto, so she loses it in kind of the same way. And I find it to be interesting. I want to ask you, Eric, your thought on Life Death Part 1. The episode, as it
were. I wish we had a bit more time also with Storm. Not so much maybe we as in like we're fans of X-Men, we've read the comics, we know the character. But I'm thinking for people who are relatively new to this, they haven't necessarily gotten much of Storm at the sort of top of her game, so that when you take her to the bottom of her game, i.e. the Mets 0-5 start, you basically
son of a gun.
Listen, my wounds, it's how I heal them.
Okay.
I think what we're missing then is, again, not we, but maybe the collective we of this audience, if they're new, they haven't really gotten much time with her before all this happened. That all being said, I mean, you and I have talked about this before too, Christian. Like, this was the line of story that I remember vividly, because this was me every issue I read, every issue I got.
Yeah.
Books, the aforementioned Books and Tobacco in Wilmington, Delaware.
We did do that.
So complete with the naughty section in the back. That was a weekly visit, and a weekly failed attempt to get to the back, but too baby faced to get through there. and so in the absence, I read a lot of comics, and I thought the storyline of her in the comic was terrific. I thought it was so grounded. It was actually, I mean, it's such a shift to go from X-Men's frothiest episode to its most serious. And that's a bit of a calculated risk. It might have almost been too much of a tonal shift, but I respect that they went there. By the way, one thing I will have to say about the previous episode, the video game. Yeah. You notice she looked, when they started looking like the cyborg from Superman 3, which got me very excited, because that is one of the, to this day still, one of the scariest images I remember as a kid from any film.
So when she starts looking like Robert Vaughn from Man from U.N.C.L.E., is that what you're thinking of?
Like little pieces popping up everywhere.
How we're talking about Superman 3 of all the Superman.
You brought up
storylines.
midichlorians, brother. Everything is safe.
I would never bring up midichlorians.
No, that was Katie.
Yeah,
That was my gaff. And you know what? I stand by it. Like, as long as we don't go towards that, we'll be fine.
No. You're putting it up as a warning sign. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I drove into the skid. I turned into the skid. But
Skids is another great character that I would love to see. I'm glad you mentioned Skids.
So where they go with this, I worry they are going to do it a little quick if how they handled the recent Blatt lines are any indicator. Sure. She's not going to be without powers for long, but right. I do hope they trust the source material on that end. Obviously 4 seasons of it. And by the way, they made him look less like Freddie Mercury than I always thought he did in the comic, which I think was a good
perfect
choice.
Timing for me to zoom in on that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. I remember getting this as a kid and thinking, why does it look like the guy from Queen? But this was such a great storyline, and also, one thing we all have been hungry for was a really legitimate version of Storm, which we have not received in any version of the extended X-Men or MCU yet.
The live action we have not. I agree.
Nowhere close to what made her such a fascinating character in the comics. So that's one thing that's great. I mean, even her scene with Forge when she slaps him, I mean, that thing is totally played as a drama. That is not a comic book superhero kind of moment. It's very human, and they're showing, real patience with that story so far. We'll see if that takes or not.
Yeah. By the way, Daniel mentioned this earlier, and Nate did the reveal, and I meant to mention it at the beginning. Yes, the older Jubilee was voiced by the original voice actor.
Which was so cool. And
excuse me, I was trying to get it out there before the sneeze, and it just didn't happen.
I was trying to talk so that you could sneeze off.
Yeah, that's all right. I was like, I can't even hit my mute button, but that's all right. I just want to make sure David, I did want to get your thoughts as you were still reading X-Men at this point, because you said your jumping off point was right around Mutant Massacre issue 210. So
somewhere on there.
What do you think about the way that they touched on sort of one of these, these seminal stories that any of us who were reading at that time? I mean, I was probably like 9 years old reading this, and it was so far over my head, a lot of it, but it was very memorable.
I think that, again, I'd like to see it expanded. You're right, Eric. We didn't see enough of Storm being powerful in this iteration of the show to realize what it's like to lose your power. And it reminds me of the Dark Phoenix saga. If you guys remember, originally the Shi'ar were going to lobotomize Jean and take away her power, and she would rather die than have that happen. She couldn't exist. She couldn't fathom living without her powers. And so for this to happen to Storm, when she's so powerful, she's so godlike, most times, most of her life, to lose her power is like Rogue would have been happy to have been shot with the gun in the comic book. She wanted to lose her power.
Yeah.
Storm is not someone who doesn't want to fly and control the weather. So the original comic, if you remember it, had pages of no dialogue.
Yeah.
Like it was just this artistic masterpiece of just images of her laying in bed and in the sheets. And it was just so different.
I gotta say, that's too real. It's too real.
No. I mean, and it's just like
it was. I mean, it was everything but the pint of ice cream, right? It was like it was just this down thing, but it was so powerful. And how they're going to recapture it in the show so far, that they're doing their best. I love the Easter eggs all around his house and all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
There definitely needs to be space. I remember it was like Life Death Part 2 was like 12 episodes later from Part 1.
Yeah, it's 198.
198, right? From 186.
And,
so
Claremont always he had it planned as a 3-part. And not, I think the collaboration with the artist in question was perhaps part of the reason, but he instead did the single issue I tell anyone to read if they're ever going to read an Uncanny X-Men comic is Uncanny 205, also drawn by Barry Windsor Smith. It's the one in the snow where Wolverine is forgotten everything, all he remembers is speaking Japanese, and Lady Deathstrike is Spiral is looking for him. Actually, I think it's both of them. In any case, I just wanted to get a quick glimpse for Katie's sake that it is basically that Storm's just like can't get out of bed.
You're zooming in on it. And it's just like my heart is breaking all over. I mean, this episode already broke my heart. Like Cammy said it in the comments, but like when she's trying to conjure the wind and you're like, oh, maybe they figure something out and she can't.
Yeah.
Oh, it wrecked me. Oh.
Yeah, you need to go back and read the issues.
I think when we get to Life Death Part 2, I might ask Katie that you read Uncanny 186 and 198. 198 is a little bit it's a little bit more of a feel-good story. But I will spoil, because I already did in context, that she does not get her powers back in Life Death 2. It's more of kind of coming to terms with it. Yeah. But
also, if I could add just one more thing, Katie mentioned that she hopes that Storm becomes something, and you mentioned she beats Cyclops without her powers. She sort of harkens back to when she was a kid and didn't have powers before puberty. She was a thief and she carried a knife, and so she handles herself and weapons really well.
Cool.
And she definitely is impressive with her lack of power in what she accomplishes.
Even before in the comics, even before this point where she loses her powers, she's already won the title of leader of the Morlocks by basically beating Callisto in a knife
Callisto.
fight.
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it's literally a knife fight. And we haven't had much of the exploration of that Storm, I don't think. And I agree. Cam Egan's highlighting sort of what Katie's talking about. It was heartbreaking when she tried to conjure up the wind and didn't. And sometimes
we can all say that.
Sometimes I look in the private chat to see what Eric has shared with me to see if it was something important. I'll tell you 99% of the time it is not important. So you want to share with the rest of the class, Eric? You want to tell everybody what was so important?
With that intro, why wouldn't I?
It's so good though.
You've already taken that bell and shoved it up your I said Callisto Flockhart.
Say it one more time.
Callisto Flockhart was my question. Thank you. I think it bang on a can.
Bang on my little seltzer water.
Morlocks McBeal, Tuesdays on Fox. So.
With the mutant baby.
with poor little Nathan dancing. And let us know in the chat what you're thinking about all of this. And I think there's an interesting mix between our panel, who knows the original story, and Katie doesn't. And but in the chat knows the story, but our pal Ivan Soto doesn't. So you know what I mean? I think it's kind of interesting. Ivan's just more beside himself, that like, why would they do this? And it's like, you do this because it's good storytelling. It's proven storytelling, you know?
Right. Well, and it's just
like, why do you got to kill Uncle Ben?
Yeah.
Because it works.
You have to. No, I get the reasoning behind these sort of story arcs. It's just when you come from the episode before, the actual full episode before, and you get the Goblin Queen, and you're like, oh, okay. And then you take away Storm's powers, and you don't go back to it for like 3 episodes, and you're like, hold on. I have a comment. But that, like, I understand, like, it's a good slow rollout that makes sense to me, but it's also one of those things that's just like, are we not going to talk about Storm? And then we do talk about Storm, and it's like, good God. This is depressing.
Yeah, it's hugely depressing, and
it's such a small nugget.
Yeah, I know. It's almost. I feel like, you know, I wish I had him on speed dial, because if I could pop Chris Claremont into a window right now and you could explain to him that this concept is so depressing, I feel like he would look at you and he would say, no. He would say, thank you, because that's what it's supposed to be.
Well, no, and
it's supposed to be tragic, you know?
No, and I do love that. It's just, it feels like a little bit like you took away more of the meaning from it, from not like focusing on one episode fully. Like to have like a half episode after this Motendo filler, which I did love. I thought it was quirky and cute and like whatever. I'm like, yeah, okay. But like when that ended and I was like, all right, I guess this is a lot of credits that must be coming after this. And then another episode started. And it was about Storm.
They've got 14 minutes of credits.
Yeah, something like that. I was like, damn.
Deep in the weeds on the various vocal actors who were doing it in Swahili, and Hebrew, and Yiddish.
They have like a whole montage of the Czech cast. So
you know, like I
it's
didn't know.
It's a good thing that they kept the episodes separate as opposed to doing like 4 minutes of the first episode and then switching to the storm and then switching back.
Sure,
I mean, that would have been a roller coaster that would have been hard to deal with.
That would have been a little too bipolar.
I
for
definitely
me.
agree. Yeah.
And Storm should have been
would've-
the whole thing, but I think if we're talking about a mixed audience, some kids would have tuned out with an hour of no power.
No, that's true. And I do agree with that. It's just because it was such like plot driven and like it feels like I didn't get enough time exploring with like as depressing and as hard as that episode was, I still felt like, well, what the hell? Come on, I need a little bit more. I need to understand like more of her day to day. I felt like I was tripping when the owl came out and and was like torturing her. Like that was really rough. And then we didn't get sort of a normalcy with her character of like, okay, what's her everyday? Like even if it was her just sitting in bed the entire time, we didn't get that downbeat, and it was depressing. And I get it. Here's the thing. Writers are supposed to be writing so that it evokes emotions out of you. And boy, did they. They really accomplished that. But then I was like, but that's all we get? That's all we get of her?
Yeah. No, and look, they're dealing with tremendous source material. And I think seeing where it goes is fantastic. And I can't wait to talk about next week. We've got to do some housekeeping, don't we, Mr. Brody, for what we were talking about. So Uncanny X-Men 110 is a fill-in issue.
I gotta go. I gotta go meet Nate. So yes, X-Men 110. They're fighting the Danger Room.
Yeah, and it's a terrible flashback story. It's actually not a very good story. It just for the
what
sake
do you want
of
for 35?
Yeah, 109 is Guardian.
You go back to 109, and that's when we get to meet Alpha Flight. You know,
well, just Guardian, I believe. Yes.
You know what? You're right. Alpha Flight's not for like a year later because
I think they were 116 or something, and then 118 was Sunfire, or the other way around.
Right. Exactly. No. I know what you're saying, but the interesting thing is that my memory is that the first appearance of Arcade is actually not in the pages of the Uncanny X-Men.
Marvel.
It is, however, a story that was written by Chris Claremont and I do believe drawn by John Byrne. And it is indeed what you're talking about. It's also not just the first appearance of Arcade, is the first appearance of Brian Braddock, Captain Britain. So it is the Marvel team up, Spider-Man and Captain Britain and Trapped in Murder World. And it's interesting because, Claremont, in addition to writing X-Men, wrote so many books in the 70s. He, like his character Sabretooth that we all know, was debuted in the pages of Iron Fist. He used a lot of his characters. He had an affinity for Carol Danvers because he wrote the final issues of the Ms. Marvel ongoing series. And I asked him about it once. It was just like, how is he able to be so prolific? And he said, well, they paid me by the page. And I was like, okay, yeah, I get it. Because that's an interesting moment in history that
exactly what Dickens said.
Marvel books were only 17 pages. They had like 5 more pages of ads in the 70s. So directly cutting into the page rate for someone like Chris. Anyway, I just wanted to tidy that up. And obviously,
yes, thank
you. Maybe we'll have somebody come up with a game show where we have like 2 seconds to answer and see, we take turns trying to describe Uncanny X-Men issues. We'll do that as a bonus episode that 4 people will watch.
It just feels like
it'll be fun for us.
It just feels like all you were trying to do was shame him for being 1 issue off.
Title
that was decades and decades old.
I had the mental image of the cover, but I didn't remember it was the Danger Room they were in.
Well,
do you feel better, Christian? I mean, do you feel like
let me answer this.
I'm mortified.
Let me answer this non-verbally. You figured it out. That's exactly
bang the can.
Can I just address something before we
please? Well, we got 2 other things. We have things that aren't X-Men to talk about.
I want to address something that Katie said, which I don't know if it's a female thing. It's just you said, "Oh,
watch yourself, counselor."
Yeah, watch yourself.
Yeah, I know. I said that's why I don't know if it is.
Okay.
Bring up that picture of Goblin Queen.
Oh God, watching Storm, it was so difficult to watch. I wish there was more of it to watch.
Yeah.
Like She's like,
Yeah.
it was so
It was so
depressing.
difficult to watch.
It was hard to watch. I wish it was twice as long.
I do. I really do. Because we didn't get that sort of release of tension. We just had tension the entire episode.
Yes.
And it was like, this is real and this feels very visceral and this is awful. But like, we didn't have a moment of breather time for her to kind of have like a down moment, kind of saying, this is how I'm going to live my life now. Like it's sort of like, you meet her at like probably the lowest of low, which is great and fine. And we've all been there. But then you don't have the sort of like, and then what's the plan after? What are we trying to do? We're trying to get the powers back. Okay. But what if we can't ever get the powers back and we don't get that sort of reasoning or that downtime? We do thrive on emotional tension of a character, but we also thrive on a little bit of a break. Like some kind of like develop the love story between her and Forge, like develop something that like, I don't know where we're going with this, but it was just, we were still stuck in the same place that we started the episode with at the very end, and like an even darker place afterwards. And I was just like, give me a little tension relief.
For our audio audience, I will point out that Kemi Egan chimed in. We ladies thrive on the emotional tension of the character, and Daniel Drew chimes in emotional damage. Yeah. So just a couple of quick Marvel notes and a programming note for this program that we're excited to share. First is the first slow to load, the first image from the set of Daredevil Born Again, featuring the return of John Bernthal as the Punisher, which is very exciting news for those of us who didn't just like that show, loved that show. My pal Z Anderson and I covered every episode of season 3 in very short order because it was a Netflix show. And we just always expected there would be more. Knowing that we're getting Karen and Foggy and Daredevil Born Again, we're getting John Bernthal as the Punisher. Obviously, we've known for ages that we were going to get Vincent D'Onofrio as Fisk. If you're going to tell the story of the Punisher, thank you for staying with an actor that worked and not being like, I don't know, a radio station general manager whose first day on the job decides he needs to change everybody's shift and move them around to different day parts. I'm not speaking of a specific station, but I do know that things like that happen. Yeah, most of them. I appreciate them not being, because look, I think their approach to Daredevil Born Again was at one point, Karen and Foggy were going to die off screen in the pilot or the premiere. And it was like, no, and somebody was like, whoa, let's put the brakes on. Chapek. I feel like that was under his regime.
When Katie said before, like 40 minutes ago, she said, I don't know, I'm a little foggy about all of this. All I could think about was Foggy from Daredevil.
I do love
the
Foggy.
First scene was going to be, oh, man, that Foggy funeral was really a bummer.
Yeah, the fact that Karen died on the way to it is unreal, like in a car accident.
Karen got run over by the hearse.
I love it.
Yeah. It conveniently happened off screen, so we didn't have to pay those actors.
Right. And kudos to Disney, by the way, for using the Punisher's logo, because there was a lot of talk about them not using it because it's been co-opted by non-Disney entities.
Yeah.
And they thought they might tame it down or alter it in some way, but they clearly aren't. So that's great.
I want to give each of you a quick moment to chime in on that before we move on to our last couple things. When you see that, Katie, that image of John Bernthal as the Punisher, did you get a chance to see that show? Are you excited? Are you just intrigued? Tell me what you think when you see it.
Look, I'm a big John Bernthal fan. He's amazing, really well done. I think he's a perfect casting for that character. Yes. Was awesome as Shane, but also this role was meant for him, and I'm very excited. I'm very excited that they have Foggy and Karen in the new series. Like, I'm glad that they listened. It's a little bit like the internet bullied them into changing Sonic. I'm very excited for this show. I'm intrigued, but whenever I do see the Punisher logo, like, I have a lot of thoughts on that. But like, I'm glad that they're keeping it to the actual character.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the character's logo since 1972 or 74 or whatever. So I think it's good to not change it. Look, there are things that you kind of need to change because of the times, but it's really what you think of. and it's such a part of his story for how he came up with it. So
Right.
I agree with David that I'm very glad that they're able to keep that in there. And just a quick comment from Daniel Drew, one of the few times where the internet did something good.
It's true.
Eric, your thoughts on seeing Jon Bernthal returning as the Punisher?
Well, the first thing that caught my eye is there will be blood. And there was so much blood on him. And that's the picture they release. And I think it's not a coincidence. They're basically saying, okay, yes, we know what you like. Here he is, R-rated. This is not feeling very PG-13 when this is the first pick.
No, and we saw with Echo that it was, it was definitely pushing boundaries. Honestly, not all, but most of the Marvel Studios Disney Plus shows have pushed some boundaries. And
even Loki season 2, the crushing scene, that I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Disney went there. And even with the trailer for Deadpool 3, like we're making some moves towards some gore and some heightened action that I didn't think Disney was going to go for, and I'm glad that they are.
Bloodthirsty Kame Egan says, I hope it's going to be better than Echo in terms of violence.
I agree. I agree.
You also could just say Chicago resident. Same thing.
She wants some of the old ultra violence there.
The other picture they released was Bernthal with blood on him walking down the street with Daredevil in costume. And it's a much redder costume, more like the comics, which I liked. They lightened it from the Netflix show.
As somebody with such an affinity for The Walking Dead, David, that you did a podcast about it for
Walkers and Talkers.
Yeah.
Love it.
What are your thoughts? And I ask you to answer that while I disappear off screen for a moment. But your thoughts on seeing Jon Bernthal?
Okay, can we talk about him now?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Like the Mojo thing.
I don't like how he treated you today.
No, thank you very much. And the Mojo thing, like once we're not talking about Mojo, change your background. Why didn't he have a storm back? Hello, he's back.
He's back. Hey,
and that's why he's perfect.
Right.
That's why. No,
But
I wanted to stick with Mojo.
My point. Bernthal has been the Punisher in many roles in other shows where he wasn't the Punisher.
Sure.
I mean, he was the Punisher as Shane in
he was. Yeah. No, absolutely.
He's got a crew cut. He's muscular. He wants to shoot people. Yeah.
I mean, and that's a thing, like with actors is like, if you're in a role that is somewhat similar to like a superhero character and you kind of just lean into those certain like things, like it's basically your audition tape for the next role.
Yeah,
and so,
he's not a rom-com comedy guy. He's a badass crew cut shoot people guy.
I would love to see the Punisher in a rom-com.
No, and with Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah. Is this your ex-boyfriend? Is this the guy you're engaged to?
Yeah. When also Jon Bernthal, I looked him up. He's 47, and I think even that they didn't like just like, oh, we gotta refresh him, we gotta make him younger. I gotta tell you, it's gonna be Punisher babies, and they didn't do that. Like they kept him.
Well, they can get away with that with men.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah,
putting that out there.
He'll be dating a 20-year-old, I'm sure, but still, it does give us hope that the fact that they had their ear to the train track and realized like they were about to get rid of two incredibly popular characters for seemingly no gain. I think that's when they began to really trust like the sort of the built-in audience this IP already had.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I got to get one more thing in before we give a programming note. And that was yesterday's revelation that Julia Garner has joined as the Shala Ball version of the Silver Surfer in the Fantastic Four film. And there's a few shows that people know her from. It's mostly the one with Jason Bateman that I can't think of the name of because
Ozark. She's got to have the accent though as Silver Surfer.
And she was also
come and take your planet.
She was also on The Americans as a sort of a featured character. So I think it's an interesting choice because there's a number of ways to go. There are other Silver Surfer adjacent characters that they could have. There's a character named Nova that's a different Nova than the one people usually think of, named Frankie. Well, her human name was Frankie Ray. She was a Herald of Galactus. So this would be very interesting to kind of see where this goes. And, it's really a casting note, but it is a Fantastic Four casting note. And today that we're recording this it is actually, as Eric Conner pointed out to me, it is 4/4.
Yep.
That is the date of today on the calendar. And I wanted to give the programming note to everyone in the live chat that just yesterday, both Eric and myself returned to my old stomping grounds of AfterBuzz TV. And some of you in the chat, Ivan Soto in particular, I know that that's where you know me and a lot of these shows from. And we did pre-record our next very special episode of this show. I'd kind of been teasing it for a little while. The gentleman that you see, our video audience, seated with Eric Conner and myself, is Joseph Culp, who played Victor Von Doom, Dr. Doom, the first actor to portray him live action on the screen. He was in the 1994 Fantastic Four film produced by Roger Corman, a film that is infamous, and we talk a great deal about that and his efforts to help people see it. But if you wanted to see it right now, for those watching on YouTube, there's probably a recommended video like right over there where you could just click on it and watch it. Because the movie was never released officially, I have no problem telling people to just go ahead and watch some pirated version of it because it's the only version that you can see. We had a great conversation with him. And if you want to see that interview, we're going to do a live premiere where I'll be in the chat chatting with people as we watch it. That'll be next Wednesday, April 10th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And we'll be sharing it with everybody then. And I don't know, I'm really excited to share that with people. Eric, any thoughts that you wanted to share as we tease this for our friends in the audience?
I would also recommend, I mean, it is fun to watch the original Fantastic Four, and as Christian, myself, and many others would argue, probably the best cinematic version we've gotten it so far, live action wise.
There hasn't been a better one. You can say what you want about it, and there's a lot of things you can say. And then also there's a tremendous documentary about the making of it, and the not release of it, called Doomed, which you can watch on Freevee via Amazon. I think you can find it other places, but that's where I watched it. And after the interview was over, I had to fanboy out and show off my Fantastic Four t-shirt that I was able to do that. So please check that out on Wednesday. I'm very excited for everybody to see it. I've seen the footage. It turned out beautifully. Huge shout out to Kevin Undergard and all of our friends at AfterBuzz TV who let us use their facilities. And Dwayne, who I've got, they shot it in 4K. So the file took a little while to render, and I was not able to go home with the drive that had it. I have to go back actually right after this and pick it up. And I'm going to then take it over to Jonathan London's house, who will upload it. And it's the old fashioned future, but very excited for everybody to see that. And Daniel Drew, amongst those, excited to see that AfterBuzz logo. Yeah, and it was wonderful to be back there for the first time in literally 4 years. And glad that the facilities are still there, and everything turned out wonderfully. And hopefully we're able to do more stuff from there in the future. But check us out for that. We'll be back talking X-Men 97 next Thursday at the same spot. We'll be at the top of the hour. We'll do it at 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern, not this quarter after nonsense, because I wanted to make sure I got to watch the Mets lose. But in the meantime, Katie, where can people find you?
You can always find me at El Sassy Pants on most things. El Sassy Pants with a Z at the end on TikTok. You can also, May 3rd, check out a really fun little film on Netflix called Unfrosted. You might see a tall chicken in there. You might not, you probably won't, but hey, I was part of it and it was really fun, and it was a great movie. So definitely go check that out. And then if you want to contact me for more, hit up my agent, Jason Hilton. He's not doing much. Go ahead. Lux Talent. See what's up. Give him a call, a little ring-a-ding. Talk about me, Katie Hampton. Thanks.
And currently in production on Unfrosted, the Carl Hamburger story, is my friend Count Eric Conner, who I appreciate being on this show, doing a show with me yesterday, and providing artwork for other shows I appear on. And where can people find you, Eric?
Well, excitedly waiting, of course, for Unfrosted. I saw Katie post that she's in that after I saw the trailer, and that trailer is so
It's
full
insane.
of amazing actors. So I am personally adding your name, photoshopping every version of it I can see, because I'm so excited that you get to share the screen with all those talented people.
I
So
do and I
mazel tov
don't.
to you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I am very excited for eating plenty of Pop-Tarts to celebrate your success. And you can join me in that journey of gluttony over at Count Eric Conner over on X and on Instagram.
And Mr. Brody, where can you and the Brooklyn Boys be found?
Well, you can find the Brooklyn Boys podcast on wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me on social media at David Brody with a Y. And if you collect wacky packages from the Topps company, there are parody spoofs of products. The end of April, the next set will contain a couple of spoofs of mine. I did a spoof of Ring Dings to the movie The Ring, and I turned popcorners into popcorners. So they're little caskets.
Oh my god,
dude!
So yeah, so every set I have a couple. So the new ones are coming out in April. So
That's a
please
killer.
buy those at on the Topps website. Thank you.
And Ivan Soto wanted us to know he doesn't like Pop-Tarts, but also Cam A. Egan, the Chris Evans Fantastic Four movies were pretty bad, but I didn't hate them. I agree, I didn't hate them. It's a similar quality to the Roger Corman one. I'm excited to see characters that I know and love on the screen, and they're not the misfire that the fan-fortastic Josh Trank last iteration was the worst movie I had seen in the theaters until Madam Web came along.
Then Web said, hold my drink.
Yeah, exactly. In any case, I know we went long today, but next week we'll be back to talk about only one episode. But before we're back to talk about it, don't forget Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, our conversation with Joseph Culp, the Dr. Doom. And that is all the time we have for now. As the great Stan Lee would say, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Christian DMZ. And don't forget my personal podcast, Blackcast, BLADTCAST. And it would be great that Stan said that. But Stan would also say, Excelsior!